For your ears only for the week of September 25th, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Eddie Robinson.
إن أننا ذاهبون إلى مجلس الأمن مجرد أن ألقي الكلمة هناك في الجمعية العامة سأقدم رسالة الطلب.
There is no shortcut to the end of a conflict that has endured for decades. Peace is hard work. Peace will not come through statements and resolutions at the United Nations. If it were that easy, it would have been accomplished by now.
Despite all diplomatic pressure to the contrary, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas last week kept his promise or threat to seek state status and membership in the United Nations. And even the prospect of a U.S. veto in the Security Council, unstated by President Obama in his last-ditch warning at the General Assembly, could not totally eclipse the sense that something close to a seminal change might have taken place, for better or worse.
Some see the sympathetic reception Abbas received giving him more stature and confidence in a new round of negotiations that the U.S. and other major powers quickly sought to arrange. Others said the stars were simply not aligned for a peace deal now, and that marching down that road again would raise hopes, underscore the limits of diplomacy, and possibly trigger new violence in a region still critical to U.S. interests. But a U.S. veto could also further undermine Washington's stature and influence in that region.
To consider all those factors and more for your ears only, we're joined again by Aaron David Miller, a former U.S. negotiator in the Middle East, now a policy scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center in Washington. His books include The Much Too Promised Land, America's Elusive Search for Arab-Israeli Peace, from Bantam, and Can America Have Another Great President, due from Bantam next year. Welcome back to our program.
Pleasure to be here.
Applause for Abbas had hardly faded when the U.S. and other major powers began negotiating among themselves about a structure to propose for renewed Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. Does the Palestinian membership bid itself change the diplomatic dynamic that's been stalled so long? Does it make Abbas the stronger leader you've said is required?
No. It clearly boosts his stock temporarily among his own public. And there was a rare, I think, moment of great pride for Palestinians as he talked before an international body with enormous media coverage about the centrality of the Palestinian issue and their just and compelling need for a state. But none of it changes the reality that that state will come into being anytime soon, because the basic problems that prevent a serious negotiation and an agreement have simply not been addressed, and in my judgment, almost certainly can't be addressed. On Jerusalem border security and refugees, suspicions are too deep. The leaders, including Abbas and Netanyahu, are prisoners of their constituencies, not masters of their political houses. And the regional environment continues to demonstrate, far from the upside of the Arab Spring, continues to demonstrate for Arab-Israeli peacemaking, I would argue, the harsher realities of what you could easily call an Arab winter. So I don't think much has changed.
If the Security Council rejects the Abbas application with or without a U.S. veto, the General Assembly could still grant non-member observer state status. That could give the Palestinians access to other UN organizations and the International Criminal Court, where it could try to counter Israeli occupation tactics. Could that leverage change the diplomatic dynamic?
No, because, first of all, it's highly arguable that any of these international bodies would seriously entertain a charge of war crimes. And the Israelis, as the UN maintained in the wake of Operation Cast Lead, have their own claims against Palestinians, Hamas in this case, for war crimes. So, no, the reality is none of it is going to change. What will change matters on the ground is some sort of crisis so frightfully painful that it convinces Israelis and Palestinians that the costs of maintaining the status quo are no longer manageable. And that combined with the prospects of some gain, pain combined with the prospects of some gain, might alter the regional calculation and bring both sides to a much more serious, bring them to make the kinds of serious decisions that they need to make.
Is there a pain for Israel, at least pain of increasing isolation in the rise of populist Islamic sentiment in Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, Syria? And what does it mean for Israel's ability to maintain current policies on peace talks, settlement expansion, the Gaza blockade?
Well, I think that a deterioration in Israel's relations with Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan would only make the Israelis more withholding. It's only going to make them more suspicious. And it's only going to make the United States more willing to support its ally, particularly in an election year. So you can't terrify anybody into making these sorts of decisions. It may well be that pain is required, but the pain has to be accompanied by the prospects of gain. And what I mean by gain is the real chance that if, in fact, these decisions are made by both Israelis and Palestinians on security, territory, borders, refugees, Jerusalem, that, in fact, what you'll get out of this is something that that will be enduring and that will actually make the situation better. So we're a long way from that, and the quartet statement, as understandable as it is unlikely to get us any closer.
And what would a U.S. veto of Palestine and the Security Council do to Washington's stature and influence around the Middle East in this era of change? Would it invite more attacks, limit important anti-terror intelligence cooperation?
It would make, our credibility is at an all-time low. We're neither admired, feared, and respected in this region as much as we need to be. I'm not sure that's going to change. And yes, a U.S. veto would be very bad. People would be showing that picture of Susan Rice with her hand up, or however the procedural issue is on voting for this, would be showing that photo over and over and over again. But, how much worse can the situation actually be? We're faced with a situation now in which the United States is bogged down in the two longest wars in American history, where the standard for victory is not can we win, but when can we leave. We've sanctioned Iran, and yet the centrifuges continue to spin, and the Iranians are working on a weapon. There's no Arab-Israeli peace. Our traditional adversary, acquiescent autocrats, Mubarak, Ben Ali, are gone, and we're going to face much reduced space to operate and maneuver as Arab publics and as weak leaders emerge in the vacuum created by the demise of powerful, strong autocrats. So, no, I think that we have a lot of trouble in this region. And I don't think American policies, frankly, containment of Iran, counterterrorism, our approach toward Israel, Gaza, the peace process, in fact, our whole approach on democracy, where we continue to choose which Democrats we want to back, I don't think those policies are going to change, particularly in an election year. And let me say this. The reality is that Barack Obama had a piece in foreign policy that came out on Friday on this. He should not risk one iota of his political capital or currency in an election year over having an unproductive fight with Israel. There's no reason now because there's no prospects of an agreement. So if I were the president, I'd husband all of my political capital. He's going to need it. Foreign policy isn't going to help him anyway. The killing of bin Laden, the Libya policy, which appears to be headed in the right direction, none of these things will be deterministic as he competes for a second term. It's the economy and it's America's conviction or lack of conviction that the country's headed in the right direction. Those are the things he needs to worry about.
Aaron David Miller is a former U.S. negotiator in the Middle East, now a policy scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center in Washington. His books include The Much Too Promised Land, America's Elusive Search for Arab-Israeli Peace from Bantam, and Can America Have Another Great President, due out next year.
Now, this quote from the news, by exporting violence, they've eroded their internal security and their position in the region. That was the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, Admiral Mike Mullen, charging that Pakistan's intelligence service is linked to the Haqqani tribal network's recent attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, an earlier targeting of a NATO outpost to the south, and Kabul's Intercontinental Hotel. Pakistan's interior minister denied all accusations.
Next, financial failures and fears at home and abroad. For your ears only.